Tom opened his door expecting another stray cat, and instead found a naked, winged woman sobbing on his porch, and his only thought was that she needed a blanket before she froze. The sobbing had started shortly after midnight. Tom had been awake anyway, tossing in bed as he often did when the house fell silent around him. The sound made his heart ache more than it ever had in years of solitude. He slipped on an old flannel shirt and padded down to the front porch with a flashlight aimed ahead. He shone the light across the steps, and there she was, crouched over like she'd been crying for hours. Her wings were spread out behind her, one looking worse than the other, bruised feathers and bloodied tips, but it was clear they weren't healing properly. Dirt streaked down her arms, and scratches marred pale skin that shimmered in the weak light of his porch lamp. Without a moment's hesitation, Tom went to fetch a blanket from inside. He returned quickly with a quilt he kept by the door for any stray animals who might need it. "Let's get you inside," he said quietly, as she lifted her head, pale blue eyes meeting his hazel ones in shock and confusion. They were tears streaked down her cheeks like rain on glass. Tom gently wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, trying not to touch too much or cause any pain. She flinched at first, but then let out a soft sigh as he held it closed for her, making sure she was warm enough from the night chill that always settled after sunset in these parts of rural Virginia. "Where did you come from?" Tom asked softly once they were both back inside and seated around his fireplace. He had built up flames earlier tonight, expecting another chilly evening alone. Vilise shook her head slowly, silver hair shimmering against pale skin as she tried to find words. "I don't know," she said finally, voice barely more than a whisper, but still full of despair and fear. Tom handed her a steaming cup of tea he'd made for himself before bed, knowing it would do little to ease the pain that seemed so clear in her eyes, now glowing faintly blue from whatever kind of exhaustion. She accepted it with trembling fingers and took several gulps without breaking eye contact, searching his face as if looking for something she couldn't name. He watched her carefully, trying not to pry too much but also needing answers. "Do you need a doctor?" he asked next. She shook her head again, more firmly this time. "No, no one can help me," Vilise whispered in reply, almost sounding like it hurt just saying the words out loud. Tom nodded slowly and let silence reign for another long minute, while she wrapped herself tighter into his offered quilt, eyes flickering back to him every few seconds, as if needing reassurance he wouldn't run away. "I'll take care of you," Tom promised softly, "until we figure this out." A single tear slipped down Viola's cheek at that statement before she swallowed hard against whatever emotions it had triggered and leaned further into his warmth, a fragile bond forming between them despite the strangeness of their circumstances. Tom sat next to her quietly for hours after making himself tea too. They didn't talk much beyond basic necessities. Food was on its way and rest was important. He'd keep watch so she could sleep safely. But each small action spoke volumes about his steadfast nature and quiet strength, even when the world seemed to have fallen apart. As dawn approached, Tom helped Vilise up into a comfortable bed upstairs, where he had pulled out extra sheets weeks ago for just such an occasion, though never expecting it might come in this form. She looked at him with wide eyes filled suddenly not only sorrow, but gratitude as well. "Thank you," she murmured before curling under the covers, still wearing his blanket. Tom smiled softly back and touched her shoulder gently once more before retreating downstairs to start planning how they would figure out next steps together in this strange new world where he'd found something worth holding on to again, even if it meant embracing mystery over certainty. Tom led Vilise inside his modest farmhouse, closing the door quietly behind him as she shivered uncontrollably in the night air. The house was warm and quiet, a stark contrast to the coldness of her condition outside. He placed a blanket around her shoulders before guiding her towards one of the old wooden chairs near the fireplace, where he had built up flames for warmth earlier that evening. "Where did you come from?" Tom asked softly once they were both settled inside. His voice was steady, almost as if speaking to an injured animal in need of care rather than a stranger who appeared out of nowhere with wings and an alien presence. Violet shook her head slowly, silver hair shimmering against pale skin as she struggled for words. Oh no," she said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper, but full of despair and fear. Her eyes were wide and haunted, searching the room around them with a mix of confusion and desperation. Tom handed her a steaming cup of tea he'd made for himself before bed, knowing it would do little to ease the pain that seemed so clear in her eyes, now glowing faintly blue from whatever kind of exhaustion she was experiencing. She accepted it with trembling fingers and took several gulps without breaking eye contact, searching his face as if looking for something she couldn't name. He watched her carefully, trying not to pry too much but also needing answers. "Do you need a doctor?" he asked next, concern evident in the soft tone of his voice. She shook her head again, more firmly this time. No one can help me," Violet whispered in reply, almost sounding like it hurt just saying the words out loud. Tom nodded slowly and let silence reign for another long minute, while she wrapped herself tighter into his offered quilt, eyes flickering back to him every few seconds as if needing reassurance he wouldn't run away. "I'll take care of you," Tom promised softly, "until we figure this out." A single tear slipped down Violet's cheek at that statement before she swallowed hard against whatever emotions it had triggered and leaned further into his warmth, a fragile bond forming between them despite the strangeness of their circumstances. Tom sat next to her quietly for hours after making himself tea too. They didn't talk much beyond basic necessities. Food was on its way and rest was important. He'd keep watch so she could sleep safely. But each small action spoke volumes about his steadfast nature and quiet strength, even when the world seemed to have fallen apart. As dawn approached, Tom helped Violet up into a comfortable bed upstairs, where he had pulled out extra sheets weeks ago for just such an occasion, though never expecting it might come in this form. She looked at him with wide eyes filled suddenly not only sorrow, but gratitude as well. "Thank you," she murmured before curling under the covers, still wearing his blanket. Tom smiled softly back and touched her shoulder gently once more before retreating downstairs to start planning how they would figure out next steps together in this strange new world where he'd found something worth holding on to again, even if it meant embracing mystery over certainty. He had a routine of early morning chores that he rarely deviated from, but today felt different. After his usual rounds with the animals and collecting eggs, Tom returned to find Violet awake, though still resting in bed. She was sitting up now, looking around curiously at her surroundings, which were foreign yet oddly comforting after days spent alone in despair. "Good morning," he said softly from the doorway as she turned toward him. Her eyes widened slightly before a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Morning." Tom walked over and placed a tray with breakfast beside her on the nightstand, and simple toast, jam, and another cup of tea to ease what must have been an awful night's sleep. "I figured you might be hungry," he explained. Violet nodded silently as she began eating slowly but steadily. She seemed more composed now compared to last night's vulnerability, yet there was still a weariness etched into her features that spoke volumes about the pain lingering inside. "Do you need anything?" Tom asked gently, unsure how much further probing would be welcomed by someone who clearly valued privacy and space after suffering such loss and abandonment from both world and kindred alike. Violet shook her head slightly, but then paused mid-bite. "I don't know," she admitted quietly with a sad smile. "Only, I miss having company." Tom's heart clenched at those words, feeling an unexpected kinship in them despite the vast differences between their experiences. He sat down next to her bed without another word, and simply let her lean against him as he held out his arms protectively around her shoulders. The warmth of human touch after days isolated from it brought new tears streaming down Violet's cheeks, but she didn't resist or pull away this time. Instead, she cried harder into Tom's shirt while he petted the top of her head gently and murmured soothing words until exhaustion took over once more. Later that day, as evening fell again, and darkness crept in around them like a comforting blanket itself, Violet opened up slightly to share some fragments about what had led her here. She spoke slowly at first, but grew gradually stronger with each revelation shared amidst cups of tea they drank together by the fireplace. Light. Her name was Violet. She belonged on another planet far away. A tragic accident killed her mate and left herself in exile from all who knew them before. There were winged beings called seraphims where she came from. Her people bonded for life. Losing one meant being cast out as tainted by death itself. Tom listened intently, feeling each word penetrate his mind with a sense of understanding far beyond simple words themselves. Grief was universal among the living. Love's loss cut deep regardless if alien or human. He knew this better than most due to recent years alone following his own wife's passing. As night fell again and Violet curled under blankets upstairs, Tom remained awake long into darkness below, wondering about how best support someone who had no home left, not even a world to return to anymore. Morning brought questions anew for both of them, but also comfort in shared presence without needing immediate answers right away either. It felt like new beginnings, perhaps despite the pain still fresh between their hearts. Wounds, souls finding solace together amidst uncertainty about what tomorrow might bring exactly, but willing nonetheless to face it side by side. And so chapter 2 ended with dawn breaking over Tom's solitary farm, where now two beings sat at sunrise sharing first meal and quiet hope in day ahead despite unknowns surrounding every step forward. Morning broke over Tom's remote farm, a soft glow filtering through gaps in the rustic wooden walls of his home as dawn spilled across the horizon. Violet stirred upstairs, her movements tentative but less pained than before. Her wing had begun to mend overnight, a slow healing process that left its edges tinged with pale blue and delicate new feathers emerging like tiny stars in the twilight. Tom stood by an old window, watching the sunrise paint streaks of orange and pink across the sky. His heart felt lighter today. Violet's tears last night had eased some unseen tension within him, a rare moment of shared grief that neither could pinpoint yet, but both sensed as essential. With Violet here now, there was no room for solitude or detachment, and more each day promised new interactions and small comforts woven together in quiet moments. Breakfast was simple toast with homemade jam and freshly brewed coffee steaming beside it on the table outside, where morning dew still clung to leaves of wild grasses. Tom had set up a chair next to Violet's spot from last night, an unspoken invitation for her company at his usual place under the old oak tree out front. "Good morning," he greeted softly when she came down dressed in one of his flannel shirts and a pair of loose sweatpants left out as spare clothing. She looked much better today, less hollow-eyed, more present to their surroundings rather than lost within her thoughts or memories. Violet nodded back at him without speaking right away. She took the offered seat next, said Tom with a grateful smile that seemed almost shy compared to how open she had been last night during tea and stories by firelight. "Thank you," was all she said before picking up her toast, chewing slowly, as if savoring each bite. The day's work began not long after sunrise when Tom suggested they head out together for some chores around the property. She followed him quietly through fields of wheat where golden stalks swayed in light breezes like waves on a calm sea. Her wings had fully healed overnight, leaving only faint marks and hints of injury. Her movements were graceful once more as she helped feed horses at stalls near their barn. "Do you mind showing me how to milk the cows?" Violise asked tentatively later that morning while they worked beside cattle grazing peacefully in pastures nearby. "I've never seen such creatures before. They're so different from our livestock." Tom's smile softened, eyes warm despite lingering sorrow over his wife's absence. He nodded readily and led her towards a small shed where dairy cows waited for their routine care. "Sure," he said kindly, "but there are some things you should know first." Over the next hour or so under Tom's patient guidance, Violise learned about milking techniquesho to gently squeeze teats without hurting sensitive udders and practiced alongside him until her movements grew confident and smooth. The bond between them deepened subtly as they worked side by side, shared knowledge, mutual respect, understanding unspoken needs through actions rather than words alone. By midday, Violise began showing signs of weariness. Again, her eyes were shadowed beneath their brilliant blue hue from lack of sleep, and emotional strain layered thickly within recent days. Tom noticed right away, but didn't say anything explicit about it until they stopped for lunch under the shade cast by tall trees dotting his property. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, handing her a sandwich prepared earlier that morning when she had been too distracted to eat much at breakfast time again today. Violise looked up from wrapping herself around another piece of bread with hesitant eyes before nodding slowly. "I am just tired," she admitted truthfully, while picking away bits nervously, her gaze darting towards him briefly before shifting back down once more. It was clear these new surroundings and tasks were exhausting her not only physically but emotionally as well. "Do you want to rest?" Tom suggested gently, after a moment of silence between them that stretched tautly, with unspoken questions lingering around edges like wisps of smoke curling upwards. Into air above them both under tree canopy. "Maybe we can get back tomorrow?" Viola's head lifted sharply, her gaze locking onto his face now with surprise, clear and widened eyes, then softened almost immediately afterward, seeing genuine concern reflected there too rather than dismissal or indifference towards her needs this time. "No," she answered after a moment of pause for consideration. "I don't think I need rest. Not here." There was something about the phrase, "not here," that resonated deeply within Tom's chest, igniting protective instincts long dormant from years spent alone, but now stirred into action once more by Viola's presence. He nodded in understanding without pressing further then, feeling grateful for small wins like this one every day brought them closer together despite differences spanning worlds and lifetimes apart. When they returned to house later that evening after finishing up last bits of chores around farmstead, Tom helped her settle into room, prepared days, clean sheets pulled neatly over bed frame now occupied by both of their belongings mixed together. As darkness fell across landscape beyond glass windows, letting night seep in gradually through dim light filtering inside rooms below roofline overhead, Violise opened up slightly more about where exactly she came from and what happened leading to her being here amongst fields far removed from home. Each story fragment revealed brought deeper sense of loss, evident within every word spoken aloud, but also strength, and resilience hidden beneath surface layers waiting patiently for chance to bloom once again, amidst unfamiliar soil growing rich under hands working tirelessly through days gone by. Days turned into weeks as routine settled comfortably around them, Tom waking early each morning alongside Violet, sharing meals together both inside kitchen space during cool mornings or out among sunlit gardens where flowers bloomed vibrantly against backdrop of surrounding greenery. They worked side by side, taking care of livestock, tended to crops needing attention before weather turned cold again, all while slowly building trust and connection between two souls wounded deeply yet yearning fiercely for solace found only in human touch after days isolated from it completely. "Do you think about her often?" Tom asked one afternoon when they stopped mid-work near cornfields ready hang themselves under blue sky overhead. "Your mate," he clarified gently, watching Violet's face close off slightly at mention of name left unspoken, but clearly he understood without need for further elaboration between them now. Violet nodded slowly, after a long moment passing by where neither spoke, just held gazes locked firmly together before she finally answered softly. "Every day. Every hour sometimes. Yet there are moments too, like helping you, Harith, that feel more connected still to who I was before tragedy struck." Tears gathered in corners of her eyes, then but didn't spill over yet, held back tightly by sheer force of willpower and determination, not falter amidst newfound hope flickering faintly ahead despite darkness lingering close behind every step taken forward. Tom's heart ached for the pain etched deeply within her. It saw glimmers of resilience to strength born out struggle against forces far beyond control, but fighting still nonetheless to reclaim pieces lost along journey thus far. "You will find your way," he assured her softly, while reaching over casually to squeeze shoulder briefly before pulling back, just as gently, into space between them once more. Violet met his eyes, then, with grateful acknowledgment shining brightly there, offering small smile in return that spoke volumes beyond mere words, exchanged gratitude for kindness shown, understanding shared through actions rather than dialogue alone. It was a moment pregnant with possibilities stretching out ahead despite shadows closing ranks tightly behind every step taken together so far. And so days passed quietly but steadily under warm sunbeams bathing farmstead where two beings, once separate, now found rhythm moving side by side amidst tasks both mundane and meaningful alike, healing hearts broken yet hopeful still for tomorrow's promise unfolding gradually across horizons stretching endlessly ahead despite uncertainties lying just beyond reach of present moment captured perfectly in time, suspended momentarily between sunrise breaking over fields far removed from home but offering solace never felt before until Violet appeared crying on doorstep seeking refuge amidst unknowns yet finding comfort where least expected under skies vast and open stretching out endlessly above heads reaching up towards stars still shining brightly even when night fell again. With this chapter, the narrative focuses deeply on establishing a routine between Tom and Violet as they adapt to each other's presence and roles within their new shared life. Through daily tasks such as farming chores and moments of quiet conversation around meals or breaks in work schedules, deeper connections are fostered subtly yet powerfully, emotions conveyed through actions taken together rather than spoken words alone. As days turn into weeks, both characters begin to heal incrementally from internal wounds sustained amidst different backgrounds and losses endured separately, finding strength in mutual support offered freely without expectations placed upon either party moving forward. The morning sun filtered through cracks in Tom's old farmhouse windows, casting a warm glow over Viley's as she lay on an extra mattress he had laid out for her atop a worn-out sofa near his living room. She stirred slightly with the rise of dawn and yawned softly before pushing herself up to a sitting position. Her wings were tucked tightly against her back now, no longer in full view or reaching out into the space around them, but their presence was still felt a constant reminder of where she came from. Tom emerged quietly from his room down the hall, dressed in fresh flannel and jeans as he had done every day since Viley's arrival. He glanced over at her with a soft smile that held an undercurrent of understanding before turning to make breakfast for both of them. Eggs, fried gently on a pan balanced atop 2 stones near his wood stove, accompanied by strips of bacon cooked slowly until they turned crisp and golden. "Morning," he said calmly as Viley's made her way into the kitchen behind him. She smiled faintly in return, but remained quiet, knowing today was different from all others that had come before it. She expected hunters to arrive demanding her return for final judgment on her actions deemed unacceptable by those who considered themselves superior. She sat down at a wooden table beside Tom, taking one of the plates he offered with thanks. As they ate in silence, their morning routine felt more poignant this time around. Every bite seemed laden with weight and anticipation that hung heavily between them, until it finally broke when Viley spoke up softly, "They will come soon." Tom nodded without looking away from his plate, but kept her words close. He knew she needed strength to face whatever would follow, just as he had grown accustomed to finding solace in the quiet moments shared here on this farm that now felt like home despite its isolation. After breakfast, they went about their usual chores. Tom checked the fences and fields surrounding his property while Viley tended to a few chickens nesting near the barn. By mid-morning, she was ready for flight, again her wings still injured, but not entirely useless, and it became clear that today would be her day of reckoning. Tom paused in mending one broken strand along an electric fence as he heard unfamiliar noises, distant cries, and the whirring buzz of small machines approaching from beyond his borders. His heart tightened with concern, knowing exactly what was happening out there. Hunters searching for Viley's before she could escape or be discovered by others who might offer her sanctuary. "Stay here," Tom said firmly yet softly to Viley's as he made a quick check around the barn and then headed back towards his house. He knew it would be futile trying to reason with those approaching, knowing full well their intentions were clear: take Viley's away regardless of any harm done in doing so. Once inside, he grabbed an old shotgun from atop one wall cabinet where such things remained unused for years now, but still held a place of importance nonetheless. With the weapon clutched tightly in hand, Tom stepped out onto his porch, looking towards distant trees lining property edges as farmland stretched endlessly beyond. There they were, 3 hunters, dressed in dark armor, with mechanical wings gliding above them effortlessly compared to Viley's battered ones. "Hello," one of them called loudly over the noise, a voice carrying authority yet tinged sharply by disdain, directed at their target waiting nearby within sight now, but protected still somehow behind human presence, standing firm despite all odds stacked against him, doing so effectively here today. Tom didn't speak directly back. Instead, he simply held his ground beside doorframe, facing hunters steadily downrange as they drew closer, shotgun cradled casually yet firmly in grip, hands ready to act, if need be, without further warning given beforehand under circumstances where none would likely have proven effective anyway. "'Tis on my land," Tom said finally with calmness that spoke volumes about depth of resolve within him regarding actions taken now versus any fear lingering, their due course being set into motion presently. "'Tis under my protection." The hunters hesitated upon hearing these words. Something in the tone and posture conveyed through human form standing before them left little doubt genuine lack of concern present when it came to own fate compared against what was at stake otherwise today: freedom versus submission for alien female whose life stood precariously balanced between two worlds colliding violently above remote farmstead now caught squarely amidst fray. "We must speak with her," another hunter insisted, stepping forward slightly but not advancing beyond reach of weapon, aimed steadily their way by man who seemed unbothered by potential consequences, waiting nearby should conflict erupt into full-blown confrontation immediately thereafter under current circumstances surrounding them all here today instead. "No," Tom replied simply once more, voice steady despite underlying tension building palpably between lines forming now a stand off persisted unresolved thus far. "Y'all have to go through me." For a moment there was only silence, stretching out tense and heavy across open space separating opposing parties locked together in standoff neither side wished for nor likely expected until this point reached, but here now nonetheless playing out like foregone conclusion drawn directly from script written long ago by forces beyond control or intervention, save perhaps actions taken presently by humans standing firm amidst chaos descending around him today. Viley's emerged quietly then, wings folded close against her body as she approached porch steps cautiously. Her presence seemed to shift the energy in the air subtly, somehow calming, even while tension remained high among those gathered here, now under watchful eyes of hunters, still waiting uncertainly for resolution that might come anytime soon once more. "They want you," Tom said gently, turning slightly so Viley could see him face to face. "But I won't let them take you." Tears welled up in her pale blue eyes again, but she met his gaze firmly this time around, seeing not fear or hesitation mirrored back at all, instead only strength bolstering through connection forged between two souls despite vast differences separating them fundamentally, yet somehow bridged perfectly none the less under circumstances unique and rare indeed. "I won't go," Viley said quietly, her voice shaking slightly with emotion, but still resolute in determination. "Not without a fight." Tom nodded silently at this, understanding the gravity of what she faced, as much as he knew his own limits clearly delineated now by lines drawn between human resolve and alien law, forcing confrontation into open here today, under skies vast stretching endlessly above heads, reaching up towards stars shining brightly, even when night fell again, a reminder perhaps that hope could still burn bright amidst darkness, closing ranks tightly behind every step taken forward despite uncertainties lying just beyond reach of present moment, captured perfectly in time, suspended momentarily. And so they waited, neither moving closer nor backing down, until hunters shifted uneasily under combined weight of resolve displayed openly here today versus authority wielded silently yet firmly by human willing to stand alone if need be against forces far greater and more powerful than oneself ultimately could hope ever truly match up against effectively, no matter how strongly felt internally drive pushing forward still amidst uncertainties lying ahead. But then, just as tension seemed poised ready to snap, taut strings holding together fragile peace maintained thus far despite odds heavily stacked otherwise in favor of hunters here today for Viles' return, under judgment awaiting elsewhere beyond this farmstead caught squarely amidst fray now playing out directly above land once remote, yet somehow brought suddenly into spotlight, starkly highlighted by events unfolding presently around them all. One hunter moved forward abruptly, drawing closer towards porch steps, where both Tom and Viles stood steadfast in their stance, protecting against encroachment, no matter cost involved potentially incurred here today, under circumstances uniquely challenging, amidst forces colliding violently above farmstead now caught squarely amidst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on regardless, ultimately proving resolve greater still when faced directly with opposition posed thus far by hunters remaining uncertainly wary amidst standoff persisting unresolved thus far. But then, just as conflict seemed imminent again despite efforts made otherwise to prevent such outcome occurring here today, against odds heavily stacked in favor of hunters advancing forward now towards porch steps, standing firm alongside human ready willing stand alone regardless cost potentially incurred under circumstances unique challenging amidst forces colliding above farmstead caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on. Tom held his ground, shotgun cradled firmly but not threateningly in hand, as he looked directly into the eyes of each hunter, calm acceptance versus forced resolve clashing starkly against backdrop, vast open skies stretching endlessly overhead under stars shining brightly even when night fell again, a reminder perhaps that hope could still burn bright amidst darkness, closing ranks tightly behind every step taken forward despite uncertainties lying just beyond reach. Moment captured perfectly in time, suspended momentarily. Viles stepped closer then, standing beside Tom, but not seeking protection from him so much as offering support alongside, facing challenge head on now, presented directly towards them both under circumstances uniquely challenging, yet somehow finding strength, bolstering through connection forged between two souls amidst vast differences separating, fundamentally bridged nonetheless under present context, forcing confrontation into open here today despite uncertainties lying ahead unresolved thus far. The hunters hesitated once more, sensing something unusual and powerful in the bond they witnessed forming before their eyes, a human man standing firm against all odds for an alien woman who had found refuge within his walls. They didn't seem eager to press forward further or force a confrontation that might end badly for everyone involved. "We can take her from here," one of them said finally, stepping back slightly but still maintaining vigilant watch over both Tom and Viles, as if considering next move carefully. Amidst standoff persisting unresolved thus far under circumstances unique challenging, amidst forces colliding above farmstead now caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on. "No," Tom repeated firmly, without looking away from hunters standing uncertainly before him, knowing ultimately stand taken here today mattered more fundamentally, perhaps in ways difficult measure or quantify directly, despite weight bearing heavily upon shoulders thus far under circumstances unique challenging amidst forces colliding above farmstead now caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on. Viles nodded slowly, understanding conveyed clearly through eyes locked firmly with Hunter's gaze meeting hers directly, seeing not fear, hesitation mirrored back, instead only strength, bolstering connection forged between two souls despite vast differences separating, fundamentally bridged nonetheless under present context, forcing confrontation into open here today against uncertainties lying ahead, unresolved thus far. And so the standoff continued, an uneasy peace held in place by Tom's unwavering resolve and Viola's quiet defiance. The hunters seemed to recognize that they would face significant resistance if they tried to take her forcefully, perhaps even more than they were willing or prepared for under current circumstances. Unique challenging amidst forces colliding above farmstead, now caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on. Very well, the lead hunter conceded grudgingly after another long moment of tense silence. We will give you this day, Tom Hartley. We leave now, but know that tomorrow is not so certain. Tom nodded once more as they turned to fly away from his property, though he understood clearly what had been said between lines conveyed subtly. Amidst standoff persisting unresolved thus far under circumstances unique challenging amidst forces colliding above farmstead, caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on. As the hunters disappeared into the distance, Tom lowered his shotgun and returned it to its place inside. He turned back towards Viola, who stood beside him now with wings unfurled slightly as if testing their strength once more after days of restorative care provided here amidst farmstead, caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow finding solace amongst uncertainties lying ahead, unresolved thus far. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice barely audible but filled with deep gratitude, and a newfound sense of connection forged between two souls despite vast differences separating, fundamentally bridged nonetheless under present context, forcing confrontation into open here today amidst forces colliding above farmstead, now caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on. Tom's smile was small but sincere as he met her gaze. You are welcome, Viola. They walked back to the house together in silence, each step carrying weight of events that had transpired under skies vast, stretching endlessly overhead, under stars shining brightly even when night fell again, a reminder perhaps that hope could still burn bright amidst darkness, closing ranks tightly behind every step taken forward despite uncertainties lying just beyond reach, present moment captured perfectly in time, suspended momentarily. Inside, the day continued as before, tasks completed side by side without much conversation needed now between two souls deeply connected through shared experiences, forged under circumstances uniquely challenging amidst forces colliding above farmstead, caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow finding solace amongst uncertainties lying ahead, unresolved thus far. It was an added layer of understanding and mutual respect, a bond formed in the face of adversity that neither could ignore or dismiss. And as night fell once more over the remote farm, Viola lay down on her makeshift bed with Tom watching from across the room. She didn't cry tonight. Instead, she slept deeply for perhaps the first time since leaving behind everything familiar to find refuge here amidst uncertainties lying ahead, unresolved thus far under circumstances unique challenging amidst forces colliding above farmstead, now caught squarely midst fray, unprepared yet somehow facing head on. And as night fell over Tom's remote farm, a thick blanket of darkness covered everything in its embrace, leaving only distant stars and the faint glow of moonlight to light their way through the silent hours. Inside the small farmhouse, Viola lay on her makeshift bed, her wings partially spread out behind her as if she needed them even while resting from their long journey. Tom kept a careful eye on her, observing every subtle shift in her body and the occasional shiver that passed through her frame. The room was quiet except for the soft breathing of both Violet and Tom. He sat by his usual chair near the fireplace, staring into the dying embers as he lost himself in thoughts about everything that had transpired over these past few days. The bond they formed seemed to deepen with each passing moment. It was an unspoken understanding between them, a connection forged through shared experiences amidst adversity. Around midnight, Violet stirred slightly on her bed and then sat up slowly, bringing her knees close to her chest as she wrapped her arms around herself protectively. Tom noticed her movement immediately, but didn't move from his chair until he heard the faint sound of her voice breaking the silence. "Tom," she whispered softly across the room. "Can I speak with you?" He looked over and saw that Violet was now sitting up straight, staring at him intently through tear-filled eyes under the dim light provided by the last flickering embers in the fireplace. Tom nodded silently before getting to his feet and crossing the space between them. "What is it?" he asked gently, as she shifted her gaze downward momentarily, out of a sense of shyness, or perhaps self-consciousness given their stark differences. Violet took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts amidst this alien environment, yet finding solace in Tom's unwavering presence. I need to understand," she began hesitantly. "Why did you risk yourself for me? Why do you help someone like me?" Tom's expression softened as he understood the weight of Violet's question and the depth of her own personal struggles that it implied. He sat down beside her on the edge of the bed, placing a hand gently over hers in an instinctive gesture aimed at offering comfort. "Violet," he said quietly but firmly, "when my wife died 5 years ago, I stopped living, just existing day by day without purpose or reason anymore." Her eyes met his then, searching for answers within those hazel depths that held a quiet strength despite the weariness etched deeply into every line and crease of Tom's face. "Existing became so much easier than feeling," he continued with sorrow in his voice. "But when you appeared here crying at my door, I felt something again." Her fingers tightened slightly around his hand, her grip both seeking support and offering it back to him unconsciously as she listened closely. "I know what loss feels like," Violet whispered through tears beginning anew from deep within the void of memories unresolved. "You're right, I thought no one could understand me anymore after my mate died." Tom squeezed her hand once more, his own thumb moving in a soothing pattern against her skin to match their shared sense of vulnerability now. "But you did something for me that I hadn't done in years," he said softly but earnestly. "You made me feel alive again." Tears spilled over onto Violet's cheeks as she nodded silently once more, the weight of her own grief still heavy but feeling lighter somehow, knowing someone else understood on some level. "My mate's death killed part of who I was too," she admitted quietly through a strangled sob. "But being here with you despite everything that separates us, maybe it's helping me feel like those pieces are coming back together." Tom's eyes softened further as he looked into Violet's pale blue gaze, now filled not only with sorrow but also hope and gratitude. "I'm glad," was all he said simply before pulling her close for a brief, reassuring hug. "You're safe here, no matter how long it takes for you to heal." She held him back just as tightly in turn, the warmth of his embrace offering solace against both physical wounds from her journey and emotional ones born out of losing what she once had. They sat together like this until dawn began to break outside, casting pale light through cracks around window sills where night's darkness still lingered reluctantly. Throughout these early hours of morning watch, neither Tom nor Violet spoke much more, but their bond solidified further under shared understanding and mutual care despite differences that would have seemed insurmountable just days before. As first light finally emerged fully over the horizon outside, painting skies in hues of pinkish, golden glows against deep blue backdrop receding gradually into pastness night had brought forth earlier. Inside their modest farmhouse sanctuary, Tom watched as Viley's opened her eyes slowly after what felt like an endless but peaceful rest within his home. "Thank you," she said softly, again, this time more genuinely heartfelt than ever before. Tom returned the sentiment quietly with a simple nod and smile as he prepared for another day that would inevitably bring its own challenges. Yet amidst these uncertainties loomed ever-present hope that perhaps tomorrow might hold promise of continued peace despite looming questions lying ahead, unresolved thus far under circumstances uniquely challenging, amidst forces colliding above. Farmstead now caught squarely midst fray, unprepared, yet somehow facing head on with strength found within each other's bonds, forming in dark times. And Chapter 6 Wings and Roots. Viley's awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the farmhouse windows, bathing her in an ethereal glow that somehow felt like forgiveness. She had slept deeply for the first time since she could remember, without nightmares or sorrow gnawing at her soul. Slowly, she stretched out on Tom's couch, feeling the stiffness from days of travel begin to ease. Tom was already up and about in the kitchen when she joined him there. He turned around with a steaming cup of coffee, setting it down before her gently, as if she were made of glass. "Morning," he said softly. "Good morning," Viley replied, taking the mug gratefully. The warmth from the liquid seeped through to her core in ways that felt more profound than just physical comfort. She breathed deeply, savoring both the aroma and the moment's quiet connection between them. As she sat there drinking coffee with Tom, something shifted within Viley. Perhaps it was finally letting go of some of her grief, or perhaps understanding more fully why staying here mattered beyond mere survival. Whatever it was, a newfound peace settled into her soul like sunshine warming earth after winter's grip had loosened its hold. Over breakfast, they spoke in short phrases and long silences filled with unspoken thoughts shared through the gaze between them. "Your wing is doing well?" Tom asked at one point during their quiet meal. "Yes," Viley nodded, reaching back to gently touch where her injured left wing connected to her shoulder blade. There was still a faint trace of pain there, but she could feel it lessening daily now under the careful care and tending by this man who had no reason to offer such kindness except perhaps something within him that resonated deeply with hers. Once fully healed, Tom continued in his low rumble of voice as he poured syrup onto pancakes from a small bottle sitting beside them. "You'll be able to fly again." She looked down at her food, then up at him sharply through tear-filled eyes. Would she really leave? She didn't want to think about it, but also couldn't ignore the stark reality that came with knowing what healing meant. "Where would you go?" Tom asked quietly, as if reading her mind, or perhaps feeling the sudden coldness creep into the air between them once again at thoughts of separation, even while both were clinging so desperately close now in moments like these, when survival still held fragile threads together only by their bond's strength. Viley sighed deeply and looked away from him to stare out kitchen window, where early morning mist hovered over fields still wet with dew. "There isn't any place left for me," she admitted softly, feeling lost once more even while being safe here in this human's arms. Tom reached across the table towards her, then hesitated mid-motion, as if unsure of how far he should push boundaries set by circumstances and cultures entirely different between them, yet now intricately entwined through their mutual suffering and finding strength in each other. He let his hand rest on hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze instead before drawing back again. But Viley surprised him when she pulled her hand free only to place it atop the one he had left behind, just briefly touching fingertips gently together. "Thank you for helping me heal," she whispered without looking up, but holding on to that fleeting connection with all the strength of spirit renewed by his presence alone. Tom's gaze softened as he looked down at their hands linked so carefully, feeling a stirring within himself too long dormant in wakeless sleep and lonely days gone past when only memories kept him company against void left open wide after losing own mate years ago. He nodded silently, but squeezed her fingers once more firmly before removing his hand again. For several moments afterward, neither spoke as they finished their breakfast under watchful eyes of dawn breaking through clouds overhead outside, while bringing light back into world beyond four walls surrounding them here inside farmhouse sanctuary that had become home for both now in ways far deeper than simple shelter offered by roof overhead and food on table provided daily. When it was time, Viley went out to check progress of her wings recovery under sunlight streaming down onto fields stretching wide around farmstead where Tom had brought hope back into life once more after years spent adrift without purpose or direction in barren expanse left open by heartbreaks both personal and universal across cosmos. She stood there now feeling each individual feather on injured side begin to return strength, stiffness giving way slowly under regimen of care that seemed miraculous in comparison to what had been known before landing here alone, weeping at doorstep, crying out for salvation from darkness that threatened consuming all remaining light left within her soul. With a gentle stretch and careful unfolding of wings partially healed already, thanks largely due Tom's dedication towards seeing this once forsaken being regain ability needed to soar above worlds again, Viley felt more than just physical restoration occurring today under watchful gaze of man who had offered second chance, not merely at life, but also love itself, even if unspoken promises didn't extend beyond confines bound by both species differences. "Can you fly now?" Tom asked softly as he approached, carrying tools needed to further aid her recovery work that would continue ongoing until full health restored once more fully within alien woman whose home world remained distant star far removed from Earth, bound farmstead currently serving role of sanctuary, amidst otherwise desolate landscape where hope bloomed against all odds through unlikely partnership formed under circumstances most unusual yet profoundly beautiful. "Yes," Viley confirmed, extending her left wing out wide before slowly folding it back again. "I can fly anywhere in the galaxy." Tom's eyes widened slightly at this admission, as if struck by sudden realization regarding consequences of healing process progressing towards completion with an alien woman now standing here beside him after days spent tending wounds both physical and emotional that had nearly destroyed her very essence when mate died, leaving behind void too immense to fill except through unlikely bonds forged between species never meant for such connection. She looked down at his weathered hand resting near her, suddenly remembering how often over past weeks had offered similar support during moments needing touch most acutely, amidst pain both shared and unique experiences of grief left unspoken yet understood deeply beneath surface layer where hearts connected, forming ties that transcended boundaries set by nature's design itself. With a small smile, Viley reached out to take his hand firmly into hers. "But there's only one place I want to be," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine emotion and gratitude. Tom squeezed her fingers back gently, warmth spreading through them both, in silent understanding of this moment's profound significance despite words left unsaid about permanence or future plans beyond immediate present where hope shone brightly amidst otherwise darkened skies left behind during journey leading here across vast distances separating worlds, yet bridged somehow by shared human experience of loss and redemption found once more within unlikely partnerships formed against all odds. Viles never leaves. The farm becomes famous locally for the angel farmer winged woman who tends crops beside the quiet widower. One evening, she lifts Tom into the sky, holding him as they soar over his fields. "Thank you for saving me," she whispers. He holds her tight. "You saved me first.